All right, so now we're at question number 21. And 21 reads as follows: Yet they themselves survive without apology, with instead their simple claims and complex colors. Okay, so 21 is a difficult question. And the reason why is because you won't be able to hear the correct answer, meaning you won't be able to try out the answer choices and hear the one that sounds the smoothest in order to answer it. You're going to have to know your punctuation rules. So if you got this question wrong, I would take down some notes. We're going to review the rules together right now. Okay, so here's the underlined portion, and we notice that it's separating out two clauses. The first clause here is what we call an independent clause. And independent clauses, I'll write it over here, right, are complete thoughts. I could technically put a period at the end of an independent clause because it's a complete thought, whereas a dependent clause is not a complete thought. I could not put a period at the end of a dependent clause unless I had an independent clause on the other side of it. Okay, so they themselves survive without apology. All right, so I hope you recognize that's a complete thought. Okay, so it's an independent clause. I'm just separating it out right now. And now I have my next clause with instead their simple claims and complex colors. Now, is that independent or is that dependent? Can that stand alone? No, that can't stand alone, right? So without something else before it or following it, it would be difficult to understand what we're talking about here. With instead their simple claims and complex colors, what, right? There's something more matting. Fortunately, we have an independent clause to the left of it that supports it. So we correctly punctuate independent clauses and dependent clauses with a comma. Okay, so that's the first rule I want you to be aware of. We separate independent clauses from dependent clauses with commas, which means that this comma right here is accurate. We want to keep that comma there. Now, there's a special word that we want to pay attention to within the dependent clause, and that word is instead. Do you know what category of word instead is? And I'll give you a hint. It's in the same category as yet. Those two are transition words, okay? And those are specific words that help the reader understand when we are transitioning between ideas. Now, usually you see them in the beginning of sentences to transition from the sentence before to the current sentence. Sometimes you see them in the middle of a sentence. If they're in the beginning of a sentence, we're always going to punctuate it with a comma. It lets the reader know, hey, we have a transition word here, letting us know that there is a connection between these two ideas. So I'm going to put that rule down here. So TR is for transition word. If it's in the beginning of a sentence, we put a comma. But it doesn't always live in the beginning of a sentence. Sometimes it's in the middle of a sentence. So when it's in the middle, right, I'll lowercase tr, I still need the comma before it, or the comma after it. But unlike in the beginning of a sentence, I need a comma before the transition word. Now, there's a special case where we don't have a comma before. Sometimes we need a semicolon before. Can you think of a circumstance when you would need a semicolon before a transition word? Well, what do semicolons do? Right? What's the purpose of a semicolon? Yeah, it acts a lot like a period, right? It separates out independent clauses. I could have put a period there, but instead I chose to put a semicolon, which means that if I have two independent clauses, right, I would use a semicolon before the transition word instead of a comma. But in our circumstance here, we have an independent clause, and then we have a dependent clause. So we need a comma separating out the transition word, not a semicolon. Okay, so let's recap the rules that we went through today. So first, we established that we need a comma to separate out independent clauses from dependent clauses. Next, we talked about transition words and how we need commas to separate out transition words from the rest of the sentence. If it's in the beginning of a sentence, we put one comma, as in the word yet, right here. But if it's in the middle of a sentence, like this word instead, we're going to need a comma before and after it. Before and after it. Unless, of course, we have two independent clauses, in which case we would need a semicolon. So write those rules down, and I would write this sentence down as well, and I would practice it a few times just to make sure that you understand those rules and you can correctly see them the next time a question like this comes up. Now that you have all the rules you need, which is the correct answer choice? Right. That would be answer choice B. None of the other answers would be correct because they're all lacking one or all of the necessary commas within the sentence. Only B correctly punctuates the sentence. Thank you.